Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Scott.
And welcome to the God or Not podcast, where truth springs from argument among friends. This is episode number 8. And coming up, Scott and I will be talking about swearing. Also in this episode, Oh, the Humanity. So grab your popcorn, sit back, and enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the center ring. This is the God or Not podcast. We're in for a great night of civil discourse here as these two warriors are revved up and ready to go. And now, let's get ready to dialogue!
Episode number 8, Scott. Forget about it.
Let's roll. I'm ready.
Let's
do this.
Swearing, right? So if
Fuck
you have,
yeah, we're doing swearing.
If you have children,
speaking of that, we should give a warning at this point.
Yes. So if you have children's in the rooms, let's just FYI, there will be some swearing. Not on my part. There'll be some bleeps. It just didn't fun for me, but on Scott's part. So Scott ruined it all for anyone younger who listens to the podcast.
I don't think I ruined it. I think I'm enriching it.
With that, here is episode 8, swearing.
This is the main event.
All right, everybody. The day is beeping here.
Beeping? Is that what you're going with? Beeping?
We'll put something in there. We are talking about swearing. And I know this seems kind of interesting, a little offbeat kind of topic, because it is a little offbeat. Usually Scott and I are fisticuffs and having a good time talking about some really serious, big issues and big topics and things like that. But tonight we decided to kind of step back and take a more fun approach and talk about something that is kind of interesting to us and kind of fun and interesting. And so we're going to be talking about swearing.
Swearing.
What do you think of swearing there, Scott? Why don't you give me your once over, buddy?
Well, to be honest, here's my deal. Here's my deal on swearing, and this is one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to talk about this, is that it's one of those things that I don't really get it. I don't really, I understand why we do it, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Here's the way I would describe swearing. So basically, we just all kind of get together and we agree that, okay, we're not allowed to say this word. And that's really it. I mean, it's just like we kind of say, okay, this word, let's have a vote. Raise your hand. Should it go on the bad list? Or no? Yeah,
like
okay.
it's a societal consensus. Like, hey,
right?
And let's compare lists. What do you have on your list? Okay, it seems like everybody has this word, so right. That's off limits.
So okay. So let's all just agree that whenever we hear that word, we're all going to get really upset. We're going to
get offended. But when we get older, it'll be okay. We could say it somehow. As you get older, the tolerance for saying it becomes more tolerable.
And then there's somebody in the back that raises their hand and say, "But that word doesn't mean no. Sorry, right. No. We've all agreed.
Listen, put your hand down.
We've all agreed. We're going to get upset.
You can't say anything. Don't say anything. Quiet." So let's shut
up, motherfucker! Right? I had to throw something in there that we could beep. Right?
Yeah, this will be really.
We couldn't have a show about swearing unless we're like bleeping ourselves.
It's going to be really fun. All right, so historically speaking, okay, the word profane originates from Latin profanus, and it literally means before or outside the temple. And so it's got this interesting kind of beginning that it carries a meaning of like a desecration of what is holy. And so, this began at like as early as probably right around the mid 1400s. And so, profanity represented secular indifference to religion or religious figures. So I found that like fascinating. I had no idea that swearing had some not necessarily a religious component to it, but that the non-religious initially used that to is basically a giant middle finger to religion. And I
had never heard that. I never heard that.
I found that interesting. And I'm sure that there was something the equivalent of swear words before the mid 1400s, but at least what we know of as profanity, that's kind of the origin. And we see that technically, like, blasphemy was more offensive attack on religion and religious figures, and it was considered sinful and a direct violation of the Ten Commandments. And so we see the secular, those folks in the secular community kind of spewing this indifference towards religion. And so I just thought that was interesting, because here we are, you and I.
So what you're saying? It's all my fault? Is that what you're trying to say?
It's all your fault. So we talk about, of course, we talk about religion all the time. That's 90% of what kind of comprises our podcast in one form or another. And to see that this has some kind of religious history was pretty interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, profane, like, ties to the whole, to the holy. So it's like desecrating the holy. But we got all these other words that we use to describe this particular act. I mean, we've already been calling it swearing. Yeah. And that kind of goes back to the idea of swearing an oath. And it's kind of related to the idea, to the sacredness of using the word profane, but it's more like they used to say things like, by God's moans, you shall see the end of these days, or whatever. But the idea is that you're kind of flippantly making an oath, and you're almost like forcing God to listen, forcing God to participate in this conversation. And so the idea of oath swearing, so that's why we say, that's why that we use the word swearing to describe this. But we also have other words too, and it's not just all about not all about religious related words. We also talk about the obscene, which is disgusting and excrement and repugnant, and so obscenity and profanity. When we're talking about language, sometimes we use those words interchangeable, but they refer to very different things. And we have other words that we use too. Explicit language. You'll be watching, you'll turn on HBO or whatever, getting ready to watch your show, and it'll say the following show includes explicit language. But if you think about what that means, explicit just means very direct and to the point. And so the whole idea there is that it is not proper etiquette, right? For proper etiquette, you need to have the pinky up when you're drinking your tea, and you need to have the salad fork on the whatever side of the dessert fork, and who knows whatever. But explicit language or coarse language, they're talking about the lower classes, basically. They're talking about people that aren't the hoity-toities.
It's interesting that we have all these different words with major distinctions, really, when you think about it, but that they've all kind of been thrown into one big pot and stirred around to kind of mean the same thing. So you could use almost all of these words that we're talking about, swearing and cursing and explicit language, and everybody knows what you mean, even though that might not be what the word actually means. It has those very real distinctions. So I kind of find it interesting that all of those words now in our society have all kind of come to mean or we all think of them as kind of meaning the same thing, when in reality, like you're mentioning, that they're very different things. Even though we're still talking about, there's some similarities. Of course, they're vocal, they're audible. People speak them, we hear them, and they take on some kind of offense. That seems to be in common, but other than that,
there's some kind of taboo or something, kind of taboo. You're not supposed to talk about this kind of thing.
But other than that, these words do have some real differences.
And even if we look at the type of the swear words that we use, like if I say this steak tastes like shit, I don't really, obviously the word shit has its origin, it has a meaning to it, but that's not, I'm not even using that meaning. I'm not talking about excrement when I say that. Maybe you are,
but probably not.
Hopefully not. Maybe, I suppose you could. But yeah, usually not. Usually just means something bad. And so the whole reason that the word was taboo is that it was talking about something that we shouldn't be talking about. But even if we remove that from the situation, clearly I'm not talking about something that we're not supposed to be talking about. I'm talking about a nice steak dinner, right? And so, or in this case, a not so nice steak dinner. And so, but even when I remove those, that situation, see, that's what I was saying before. It just like baffles me. I was like, what is it? The vision do you picture like a steaming pile of poop on my plate when I say that, or am I forcing you to to imagine eating that kind of thing? Or if I say, I went to a concert last night and it was fucking awesome, I think it's pretty clear from my sentence I'm not really talking about anything sexually. It's a confusing thing to me.
Well, I think you said it right when we're talking about taboo, and things that are taboo are obviously they're kind of societal driven, and like incest, for instance, that's taboo, and there's still a few states out there where that's not illegal. So if you think about it from a moral perspective, I'm not sure who you're offending there. And I don't know that it's wrong. It's just taboo. Like, it's just something that we have decided as a society that is, hey, we don't like this. For some reason or another, we have a distaste for this kind of thing, and so we're just going to say we don't like. And so that is the same thing with some of these words. But there are many, many reasons why we swear.
All right, hit me up here. And why do we swear?
So we have several. Okay, there's this guy. His name's Steven Pinker, and he's come up with 5 possible functions for swearing. And the first one is abusive swearing. It is intended to offend, intimidate, or otherwise cause emotional or psychological harm. And so, as we were kind of getting ready to go for this podcast, we were talking about this, and you were swearing left and right. I mean, we would have to beep out every other word you said. But then we came to this particular word, and you didn't say it.
Yep.
I know why, obviously, but this is very interesting to me. You were like this and oh, by the way, we should talk about the N-word.
Right. Yeah.
And you didn't say it, and I was like, I'm glad you didn't, but I was like, man, that's really interesting. So, we would probably classify the N-word under abusive swearing, because that's what the original intent, I think, or at least that's what it came about to be. Of course,
right.
I think everybody knows what the N-word is. I don't think we need to say it here. And it was meant to be disparaging,
right?
At least towards the end of the history of that word.
Dehumanizing too. Well, let me tell you this, okay? We've been raising our kids, and we don't really worry about them swearing. We've talked to them about that. Oh, before we get into this, we should point out Steven Pinker is he's a psychologist at Harvard, and so that's we didn't just We didn't just pick a random person off the street.
He's got street cred, right?
Right. Yeah. So when we were talking about it to our kids, because like I said before, I don't really get, okay, so we're gonna all pretend to be offended when we hear this, and so so I talked to our kids, and they obviously hear swearing in various places, and including I don't think I swear a lot, but I don't go out of my way to avoid it. And so we told them, it's not that big of a deal to us if you swear, but we do have a problem with this type of abusive swearing, right. well, not even abusive swearing, just abusive language in general. Right. And so, we would have a problem if they were going to use the N word because of the history of the word and because of what it entails, when you say it.
And it's not those other words, or at least a lot of the other words, they're not directed at someone specifically. Right. You can say those words in all kinds of different scenarios, and it's not meant to hurt in a lot of ways, especially when you're, but when we're talking about the N word, that is the reason for that. I mean, at least within, that's off limits. Now, I know that in the African American community, sometimes the word is used between each other.
Sometimes,
but it's not offensive. A lot of times when they use it.
Some would see it as not offensive, but there are some African Americans that are very much against other fellow African Americans using that word, even just amongst themselves.
Yeah, I was just pointing out the fact that it can be used within their community if they deem it appropriate amongst themselves,
right.
And it has obviously, but that would be obviously off limits for or everybody else would consider that.
I think in a way they kind of adopted that word and kind of made it their own, and took, and in a way that takes the power away from that word, in much the same way that the LGBTQ community, thinking of the Q there, right, queer, that for a long time that was used as a slur to refer to groups of people, and they decided that, well, we're just going to start using that word ourselves, and that kind of took the power away from that word. It kind of took the bite out of it, and so I can kind of see that kind of thing going on. But yeah, I mean the abusive swearing, the dehumanizing words in particular, racial slurs in general are kind of nasty, but I think that in America, especially, we, this particular word has a long history, and it's very destructive. And, I think that we should be able to say it, because I've always thought that it's not so much the words that you use, it's the meaning behind the words. But I've come to learn that there are, how would I say this? There are implications for using particular words, because not everybody's going to understand it the same way that you do. And so, because of that long history of that word treating people like animals, I mean, to me, that's the disgusting part. Okay. Not, it's not the sound that's coming out of somebody's mouth. It's trying to put somebody else, another human being, on a plane so that they're not human anymore. And so to tie it all together, when I was talking to my kids about that, I told them that's the real problem. Now, having said that, we don't mind if they swear in the house, and they don't swear very often. In fact, we very often get comments from other people, strangers even, on how polite our kids are. And both my kids are very sweet and very thoughtful, but they can, we don't mind if they swear. But of course, they understand that not everybody's like that. They can't go to school and start swearing because, there's different expectations there.
So do you think that your kids maybe don't swear very often, partially because you've given them kind of a roundabout permission? Do you think, how we all are by human nature.
Mhm.
Hey, don't do that,
Right.
and I'm going to do that. And especially kids. I mean, so do you think that maybe has something to do with the fact that your kids you've kind of taken the mystery or the appeal of swearing away from them by saying, sure, I mean, if you use some of these words, I'm not, daddy's not going to
I
go
think
off
so.
the rails. I mean, do you
I think that's
that's
part of it. I think
Yep.
part of the reason that we swear is to elicit an emotional response or to express an emotional response of our own, right? And so if they know that it's not going to elicit that response, I mean, come on, let's be honest. 10-year-old kid, much of the reason that they're going to be swearing is to piss off their parents, right? To rile people up, to rebel, right? To show that, okay, I'm a person. I get to choose what I say. You can't tell me what to say. And so, so I do think that kind of takes some of the oomph out of it. But at the same time, we tell them abusive language, not, it's not the words that you're talking about. It's the meaning that you're trying to imply. If you're saying things, if you're saying things to try to dehumanize another person, I have a problem with that. But we also explained why, why the reason. It's not just like you don't just say, you don't say these words and boom, you're done. Here's your list of 7 words you're not allowed to say. And, we'll move on. We talk about the meaning and all that stuff behind it. So, I'm not saying that that's, we've discovered the best way to raise your kids or anything. It's just the way we chose to do it. And we've had good results with it so far.
So that is abusive swearing there. Now, the next one, cathartic swearing. And this is used in response to pain or misfortune. And I find this funny because my wife's probably going to kill me for this. In our home, we don't swear very often. It's a rarity, but she admitted to me that like if she hurts herself or something of that nature and she'll swear, she feels better. She actually feels better about the situation. I mean, anyone who stepped on a f***ing Lego, right? Or something, or stub your toe. Something like this happens, and you're able to use these words. We have a physiological response, and it makes us feel better.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, and I'm sure there's several obviously overlapping reasons for that. But that is cathartic swearing used in response to pain or misfortune.
Well, I think that again goes back to the idea of an emotional response. It gets your adrenaline pumping. It gets your body ready to respond to danger. It kind of riles you up. In fact, they did have you ever heard of the Mythbusters?
Oh, yeah.
The show, the Mythbusters? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I used to love I still do. But the Mythbusters investigated this. They wanted to know, okay, if people are swearing, can they endure pain more easily? And so what they did is they have people like submerge their arm in ice water and they're allowed to swear. Okay. And the idea is that they need to keep it under the ice water as long as possible. And then they can swear all they want. And then they have another group that can do it, that put their arm in, but they're not allowed to swear, but they are allowed to say some of those modified, the darns and the filth, flarn filth and the frickin' and all that stuff and the shut the front door and all those things. And so, and they found that when you swear, you can, it's true. Your wife has experienced firsthand, the way our bodies work is that when we get in it, when we have an emotional response and when we get our hackles all upright and everything. And we can actually, our pain threshold goes up a little bit. So it's just really, I don't know. It just seems kind of odd, but kind of amazing to me that we can do that kind of thing. We can say some words and it has a reaction. Right.
That psychologically it has effect on us in a physiological way. It's very interesting. So that's cathartic swearing. The third one is dysphomistic swearing. And this is used to convey that a speaker thinks negatively of a subject matter, and he wants the listener to do the same. And so
that's maybe when I'm saying that my steak tastes like shit.
Right.
Would that fall into this category?
I think it would. You're trying to kind of relay a point, and it's specifically intended for some kind of audience. It doesn't matter the size, but this isn't like you whack your toe on the bed frame, or you step on a Lego and you're swear, or you're in the car alone and you're swearing at somebody. You're road rage, and it makes you feel better, and that's kind of why you do it. This is specifically intended for some kind of audience, and it's obviously intended that the person is going to use a word and a disparaging word to convey a negative something or other, and he wants to portray that to the audience, and he hopes the audience would, feel the same or have empathy and that kind of thing. So that is dysphomistic swearing.
Okay.
That
was good. Yeah. That was good pronunciation there. That was spot on, I think.
Thanks. I tried. The fourth one is emphatic swearing. This is intended to draw attention to what is considered to be worth paying attention to. So, so this is like, shut the fuck up. But so this is intended to draw attention or additional attention to something that somebody wants somebody to pay attention to. So that is emphatic swearing. You have anything else on that?
No, I agree. I mean, that would be, maybe that would be the example that I gave. This concert was fucking awesome.
Right. Yes.
It's just like an emphasis, but I think it's more than just, it's because we also have other words that add emphasis, like very.
Right.
And like really, really fun
awesome.
time at the concert.
Right,
yeah. But it's like a way of conveying, because for when we use language, when we use words, it like conveys an image or a picture or an idea or a concept or that kind of thing. But this is a way that we can kind of add an emotional component to it.
Right.
And so it's like, it's almost like, switching from black and white TV to color TV. Oh, hey, that's another one, by the way, colorful language, right?
Oh,
colorful language.
That's true. Right. Yep.
So that might, so maybe we're onto something here, but it's like, it's like adding another dimension to the thing that you're trying to say. So when I say this concert was fucking awesome, clearly I enjoyed the music and I had a good time. And, but that would also mean that, it was really meaningful to me, or it was, it was like a, not just a, fun time, but like a very memorable time, or
adjective,
something along those lines.
A lot of times like an adjective or adverb, right? The last one, idiomatic swearing. And I have a little something to say about this one. Idiomatic swearing is used for no other particular purpose, but as a sign that a conversation in a relationship between speaker and listener is informal. So with idiomatic swearing, I mean, this just happens like in normal conversation. And this happened, I was a fireman for a long time, still hold my credentials as a fireman, and the firehouse can be at certain times a very colorful place. And and the guys would,
well, whatever do you mean by that, proud sir?
The guys would swear at some stations, some firehouses, so often. We're gonna get here in a minute to how often we swear, but they would. Sometimes it was every other word, and I find it interesting that some of these guys, some of these firemen, when they went home, they were able to actually not swear at home. And I have no idea how that happens, because it seems to me, at least, that when you do something as often as they did, when you swear as often as they did at the firehouse, going home or going anywhere else and doing it just seems almost like habitual. Like it's just going to come out. There's nothing that it's just automatic. It's a response. It just happens. And so I'm not sure how they are able to tame their tongue. But some of them were able to. Others just didn't give a So they would swear at home, they would swear at church, they would swear at work, and that's just what they did. And so that's that idiomatic swearing. So how often do you see this in your workplace? Obviously, you're in academia. So do you see this at all, either student to student, student to professor, or even within the ranks of like academia, professor to professor? I mean, how often do you see this kind of just conversational kind of swearing?
Not a lot. I mean, that's not really surprising, because before I was teaching at college, I did teach some time at the high school level, and so that was a little bit different there. I mean, there's a certain an atmosphere of not just education, but also of trying to impart social norms and accepted behavior and that kind of thing. So there's kind of some pressure along those lines. Once I started teaching college, though, it was a little bit different. It was kind of that expectation was released a little bit, but still, it's not like I hear a lot of swearing, largely because college students are not. There's not so much inner pressure for them to express their individuality.
It's not cool anymore either. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think it's not cool for that reason. I think because they don't really need it because it's not like they're fighting something that's resisting them, because they're in college. They are on their own in many ways, and if not completely.
Now I've noticed that. So, I wondered if I get your take on this, because one thing I've noticed too, because I've worked with students for a few years now, and one thing I've noticed is that you have kind of an immaturity level, and not to say that the swearing and immaturity that obviously that they're somehow correlated or caused, but I see students, freshmen, sophomore, junior, and even though they're younger, I see some more immaturity. Some of these words being used. And it almost seems as if once someone becomes a senior, I don't know if that's like, hey, grow up time. Now, and this might not be the case, but it just seems, for me, looking back at my high school time, it's almost like it's just interesting to see the change that freshman, sophomore, junior, it's about me, it's about being cool, it's about being popular, and then for some reason there's a switch that goes on when you become a senior, and now it's about, you see a lot all the time, the seniors would nominate maybe a mentally handicapped person to be prom king, right? Like, but you wouldn't necessarily see that I don't think in some of the earlier years, but there's something that happens a senior year in high school that makes people, I don't know, like they feel this desire, urge to kind of grow up. And now it's less about like trying to be cool, and now more about like, hey, I got a lot to worry about. I'm off to college here next year. I'm off to work next year. I got too much stuff to worry about and do to be involved in kind of this drama and stuff. So that's just kind of my take. So I see less of that, believe it or not, within senior year or freshman year in college than I do with the younger. What's been your experience there, if any? I definitely would say similar things. I mean, it's well, we call it maturity, but I think that's kind of something we just label it after the fact. I think the underlying source of it has to do with, but before we were talking about control. It's about trying to express, I'm me, and I'm in control of what I want to do. And so I think as preteen and early teenage years, kids are still very much under the control of their parents. And so there's so few things that they can control. Right. And the things that come out of their mouth, that's one of those things. And so that's why that's a tool for them to
to not only, stick it to the man or whatever, to express to other people what they're feeling, but also to show to themselves, to reassure themselves that, yes, I can start to control things. When you're younger, when you're 5, 6, 8 years old, you don't really worry about being able to control things.
Right.
You're just kind of focused on your immediate needs, and you just want to have fun and eat delicious things and so on. But then as you're becoming a teenager, you're realizing, okay, I'm a person here in this world, so I need to start making other people aware of my individuality. And so you start to do that. And then when you get to be a senior or into college and that kind of thing, then it becomes more clear that you are, in fact, in control of your life in so many other ways. The need for expressing yourself in that particular way is not so strong.
Yeah, it's almost like your parents telling you to do something, and you're resistant, even if it's good for you, until they say, "Fine, do whatever you want," and then you go ahead and do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just didn't want to be told what to do. Like, I'm at that point now where I want my independence, and I want that, I want to feel like I have some kind of stake in my own life.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I mean, that's just what we were saying before. It's not the particular words. It's the fact that you're not allowed to say the words.
Right. Well, that's true.
And so the word itself, I mean, kids giggle when they say poop, but it's not quite the same thing.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it's not the meaning that's being conveyed. Mom, this food tastes like shit. It's not. It's not that meaning that they're.
I would not be here for this podcast had I said anything of the sort.
Well, I'm happy that you're able to curb your tongue and survive your childhood to get to this point. I don't think I ever said that either, but I don't know. I kind of lost my train. Oh, but it's the fact that you're not allowed to say that word. It's not the meaning that you're conveying. It's the action itself. That's the big deal.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah. What about like somebody with
Tourette's,
with Tourette syndrome or Alzheimer's or something like that, and they've done research on that, and somebody with Tourette syndrome or somebody with some kind of dementia, a lot of times they have difficulty speaking because their brains aren't functioning correctly, or they're losing brain function and that kind of thing. But they find that a lot of times these people can still swear, and they've I'm not sure how strongly they've proven this, but they've conjectured at least that is because of that emotional tie, right? It's that emotional connection, and so the swearing kind of comes from a different part of your brain. It comes from an older part of your brain that's from our early ancestors. They call that the animal brain or the reptile brain. It's the emotional center. We feel it all the time when we we know it, quote unquote, know with our heads that we should be doing one thing, but our emotions kind of tell us to do another thing. I mean, that's it's that part of our brain that gives us that feeling. And so like when people with Tourette syndrome, it's, their cortex, the frontal part of their brain, where we do our language processing and our conceptual processing and that kind of stuff is not functioning as it could otherwise, but that brain stem, that part of the rear back of the brain, right? That ancient reptile brain that stirs up those emotions, and those words are tied to the emotions. And so then they can come out like that, and so somebody who can't speak somehow can swear, or sometimes they can do other things like they can sing.
Yeah,
but if somebody is
that reminds me of the pastor at our church talks about a lot how we would have to go make visits to the hospital, visits to the nursing home. We would bring people communion, and oftentimes we were visiting relatives of like members of our church, and they have dementia and stages, and they don't know who their family members are. They don't know who we are, but they could sing 5 verses of a hymn, every word, and not miss a word. It's so interesting that there's parts of aspects of their life that are just completely gone. They can't even themselves, but other aspects that other things that they can remember that just kind of jump to the front, and they have no problem doing that at all. Yeah, that's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So how often do we swear? Obviously, this is person dependent, but an analysis of recorded conversations has revealed that on average, we swear roughly 80 to 90 words a day. Like, that blew my mind. That's a little under.
I'm way behind my quota for today.
You got to catch up on this podcast.
I got to fucking catch up today.
Yeah, so it's about half to 0.5% to 1%.
Oh, so I have to make up for your deficit now too. This is average. The two of us have to average 80 to 90 words, and so if you're doing like 10 words a day, I got to be like way up there.
You really got.
I've been slacking.
You got to really take over for me, Scott. Help me out. So, but that works out to be about 0.5 to 0.75 or so. So a little less than 1% of all of the words that we say in any given day are swear words.
Wow,
interesting. And sometimes we don't swear. This is going to be a fun part for me because I my whole life have.
This is your wheelhouse right here.
I know a lot about
the
this.
Fake
right?
swearing.
I haven't really ever sweared very, very often. Sometimes I have, but it's really the exception. Obviously, not the norm. And this is called a minced oath. They're euphemistic expressions made by altering or clipping profane words and or expressions to make them less objectionable. So, for instance, son of a gun, or you friggin' idiot, or darn it, or mother huncher. That last one was
I've never heard that before. I've never ever heard
made that sucker up. I thought about copywriting that bad boy there for a while. So I wouldn't swear at anywhere. Like, and I think one of my good traits is that I am Jamie, and I am who I am no matter where I am. So when I'm at church, I'm the same person as I am at home, as I am at my job or anything else. And so when I was at the firehouse, guys were just swearing left and right. And so I guess some of that kind of overlapped, when I caught some of that, so to speak. And so I use these minced oaths all the time. And mother huncher was my go-to word. Everything was that mother hunchin', whatever, or you dirty mother huncher. So that was the expression that I liked to use. And we see this all the time. One of the funny things that I found when I was doing a little research about this was that in 1941, a judge actually threatened a lawyer with contempt of court for using the word darn. And so
well, that doesn't surprise
1941, but still, I mean, it's just.
The funny thing is the case was about socks that had a hole in it, right? Okay, good enough.
So question, is swearing morally acceptable?
I would be remiss, though, if I didn't tell you this story, because my mom, I love my mom. She's an awesome person, but she has a tendency to repeat her stories. And so my wife thinks it's hilarious. She's heard the same stories of when I was a kid over and over again. And so, but one of her favorite stories to tell me or to talk about is when my brother's just a couple of years younger than I am. And so you can imagine when we were growing up, we were kind of at each other's throats and so on. But they would get mad when we would swear at each other. And so, so I sat down and I was like, okay, all right, I can't say those words. I'm going to make up some words. And so we made up our own swear words. Like I called my brother a panker. right? I called it. They didn't know whether to, to yell at us or start laughing.
That's right. That's terrific.
So we kind of and we were like, okay, yep, that was the reaction I was looking for.
Do you remember the classic movie, A Christmas Story? Where they're changing the tire. Yeah. That scene where they're changing the tire. He's got all the lug nuts in the thing, and then his dad turns and the lug nuts go everywhere, and he says fudge. But he said the real world, the F.
But I didn't say
fudge.
Fudge.
Next scene in the movie, he's got that soap something or other. I don't know what that thing contraption was in his mouth.
Yeah, Life Boy or Safe Life Boy, was that the kind of soap?
I don't know.
Because then he had his little blurb about how the different soaps taste. Yeah, but exactly that same thing.
Yeah, he had the soap in his mouth. So question, is swearing morally acceptable?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's
there's
where
there's more to that question. Okay, sorry.
That's more to that, right? So then as we kind of talk about this, we're just kind of moving and we ask ourselves, okay, by whose standard? So we know that swearing, and when I say swearing, I'm including kind of all of these things that we, cursing and all of the things that we talked about, kind of lumping them all into that word swearing. Mm-hmm. And so we see how society and culture have kind of made these words taboo, if you will, like we talked about earlier, and that for a certain percentage of our culture, our society, they would be considered in some way, I guess, immoral, or maybe not. Maybe that's too strong of a word. Obviously, maybe taboo is just the perfect word for it. Like, hey, we don't do this kind of thing.
Right. And
most people don't have a real reason why, other than we just don't.
Right.
And so.
I would say it's more like a breach of etiquette.
Okay, I mean that would probably describe it well.
Right.
And so, but obviously there's some religious objections to morally to swearing. Mm-hmm. Now, I guess for me, I don't necessarily have a direct problem with other people swearing. Mm-hmm. And it's different than I would have a problem with someone else stealing. I would have a problem with someone else lying for gain, for their own personal gain.
So clearly, in your mind, there's a difference there.
Right, there is, and so for me, swearing, I really don't have a problem with other people swearing, but from the religious standpoint, we do have some good reasons to not swear, and so I thought I'd talk just a little bit about that.
Okay.
We have certain passages of scripture in the Bible, when we take them in context, in Ephesians, it says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. In 1 Peter, we have, for whoever would love life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from deceitful speech. And we have some, we have other passages, and it's basically the idea that God has called us to be a good representative of him, and we believe that some of these swear words would fit into an unwholesome kind of talk. So, for instance, in our house, we don't let our kids swear, and we don't swear. And we explain to them that, listen, in the Bible, it talks about how God wants us to have kind of a pure heart and wholesome talk. And there's scripture in the Bible talks about that what flows out of the mouth is an overflow of what's in the heart. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I do see that. When I'm angry, not so nice things come out of my mouth. When I'm feeling charitable and loving, obviously nice things do. And so there's some truth to that, even if it is, even for the non-religious, if they want to take some of these sacred texts as just being from a wise sage, this idea that, that there's still some content that you can take from that. So,
So based off of the, that kind of a perspective, what would you think about, is there a religious objection against using a word like shit?
No, other than we would classify that maybe as unwholesome talk.
But poop would be okay.
Right. Again, so
then what would be the difference there? I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. I'm just curious.
No. You're right. No, I get. Yeah. So the distinction probably lies with what we consider socially as proper. I guess that when we look at swearing as a Christian, I could kind of break it down into two kind of forms. I think we have the swearing we've been talking about with the profanity, the different words, and then we have more what we call blasphemous type of swearing or taking the Lord's name. So there's a difference. Like swearing is almost kind of secondary to me. Hey, if you want to swear, that's fine. But other things like, in the Bible, the second commandment says you shouldn't take the name of God in vain, meaning you shouldn't use the name of God or Jesus Christ in a way that's flippant. And so while I don't care if somebody swears, obviously if you're swearing like a trucker or a fireman around my kids and there's no way for us to kind of be rid of this situation, I might say, hey, there are kids around. So
do you feel like that's damaging your kids in some way, or what's the objection there? Are you worried that they're going to take that as a positive example, or?
Well, I mean, you could look at it as maybe the kids see it and maybe they look up to this person and they think that's kind of cool. Well, and if he's doing it, then maybe that will kind of, I don't say rub off, but maybe they'll say, well, so if he did it. So they kind of
see it as an excuse that they can do it themselves?
Yeah, and if they see, more people doing it. And I think, too, it kind of does boil down to a lot of what we have constructed as a social kind of construct of what seems appropriate in different times and different places. So obviously I would take a lot less offense to somebody, to a fireman swearing on the fire ground as I would if that same fireman were, say, sitting in the pews at church, or we were out to dinner with my kids. And, so obviously it's situational. And I think it has, obviously, we talked about that earlier about kind of, it doesn't as much have to do with the words, but more or less the kind of the content of your heart. Like, what was your meaning behind that? What's your purpose for this? And so I think some of that has kind of bearing on that. But so while I'm okay with other people swearing, and I usually won't say anything at all, I do, and I don't want to say take offense, because I don't necessarily take offense, but I don't like people taking God's name in vain. And so I don't know that I would ask a complete stranger to not do that. Like, hey, man, if I'm a Christian, I'd appreciate it if you maybe wouldn't say that. So I may not say that to a complete stranger, but if it's somebody I know or an acquaintance, and we're in a position maybe where we can't leave or something like that, to me, I think it's almost there is and I don't want to I want to be very careful because I don't want to compare the two. Analogies always fall short, but the N word for a white person saying the N word to a black person is offensive to them. It has a certain meaning to it that they find hurtful. And in a similar way, not the same way, but in a similar way, I think Christians, at least I do, have a similar kind of response or reaction or feeling when somebody takes God's name in a disparaging kind of way or uses his name real flippantly.
So let me ask you this about that specific situation. And I don't mean to be condescending with this question, but I know it's going to come across that way. So I'll apologize in advance. I don't mean to be condescending.
Yeah.
But so what is it about that? If somebody said Jesus Christ or something when they hammer their thumb or something like that. And so, I think the origins of why that's, that would normally have been part of an oath or something that, by Jesus's blood, this hammer shall fail or whatever. But do you, so I have a legitimate curiosity here. So do you personally feel injured when somebody says that, or do you feel like you're standing up for God when you hear that?
Yeah, kind of a little of both. But again, it's really situational. So if I'm over at someone's house and they go out, hey, let me come show you this new project I'm working on out in the garage, and we go out there and he starts to work, or they start to work on it, and they hurt themselves and they say that, I'm not gonna be like, hey, take it easy. I probably won't say anything. But if I'm around them and they're going to continue to use that, I do feel a certain sense of obligation, kind of a certain sense of like, hey, they are.
Do you feel like God's watching, like God's watching you, and you need to to fight the good fight and stand up for what's right and that kind of thing, or what's the motivation there?
It's more like how Italians, man, they're all about their family, right? It would be like saying, hey, your mama's a sucker, and really meaning it. To an Italian, like, hey, you don't talk about my mama. And so it
was that your Italian accent right there?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't trying. Hey, forget about it. Listen, I got my friend Tony, but it's almost like, and I don't feel like a certain responsibility, like to God, in terms of sticking up for God. I don't even fight his own battles, but in terms of like, it's offensive in the same kind of way as if someone was talking disparagingly about your mom. You care very much about your mother. She's your mom. And so.
But in that case, I would feel like I am defending my mom.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, but in terms of when you say defending, I almost feel like it's like almost like I need to do this or God's going to think differently of me kind of defending, almost like, God's looking down to see if I'm going to be a good boy. And that's kind of not it. It's more like something that I consider sacred and very important to me. And someone else is using it in a very loose kind of way. And like I said, it's very situational. I'm not walking up to some guy on the street, and saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. It's typically, it would be, and I don't think I've ever done this, to be honest with you. But if I were to do something like this, it would be in the instance where I'm in a position where I'm going to be around this person. Let's just say I take another job somewhere in the office. And the guy in the cubicle next door makes a habit of saying this all the time. I might ask him politely, and he's under no obligation to listen to me. It's not like I got anything, it's like I got any power over him, right? He's no obligation. It's almost a courtesy. Like, hey, this is very important to me, and I'd appreciate it, man. I don't care if you can say anything else, it just bothers me. And so, and it is kind of on that level. And so, I'm not like some crazy holy roller who's walking out the streets with some kind of jacked up Christian tract, on a soapbox, turn or burn. Hey, don't say Jesus' name in vain, kind of thing. That's,
some of those phrases seem to come to your lips pretty easily.
Yeah,
I have a hunch
flow,
you've been. I'm going to bet that you have a bullhorn in your house somewhere.
I have a big old crate that I stand on now. No, but you see, so again, I see your. I see where you're coming from, and I would agree with you in almost, and I don't think we have a disagreement about this, but I would agree with you on that, this idea of swearing and this is social construct and things like that. I just think the place maybe where I draw the line is, hey, this is very near to me. It's very dear to me. It's very important to me, very special. And so it's I feel like it's disparaging. And
I was just curious if there was like do you feel like you're preventing actual damage to either you or to God or to the person saying it or whatever, or is it more of like an emotional response? You've been told not to say these things, and so we do to some extent have kind of this. This inherited drive to kind of get along with the system, to try to get along, to try to fit in, or to try to go with the flow. And, is it more like that, or is it like an actual, like, because I've seen people actually get angry about this kind of thing. And I was like, why are you getting angry? At best, you're doing exactly what they wanted you to do,
right.
And
so,
at worst, you're just wasting your time.
The best way that I can describe it is almost like an offense or an assault on one of your family members. They're very important to you, and you just don't want to hear them being talked about in that way. And I think that's the closest way that I could say how I feel about that. Now, I think that it's not only is it ridiculous, but it's also very counterproductive to do like what you say that you've seen before, where people get super angry, super upset over that kind of thing, because more than likely, I mean, just looking at it from a sheer, almost like selfish kind of perspective of like, if you really do care about people's souls and you want to influence people towards the worldview you believe is true, like yelling at them and screaming at them is probably not going to be the way to influence them. Now, I think that you'll gather more bees with, what do they say, more bees with honey than vinegar. So I think that, and I mean, I'm saying this in all sincerity. I don't know. I don't think I've met anyone who I don't think wouldn't stop saying that if I asked them to. You know what I'm saying? Like everyone that I have met.
Unless they're specifically trying to piss you off.
Right. But most of the people that I deal with on a day-to-day or even meet, I think there is a sense of, like, I'm not going to say the N-word. That's disparaging towards people. It's hurtful. And they don't want me to do that.
Some people avoid that word because some people are thinking, if I say that, I'm going to get my ass kicked, right?
Well, yeah, that's true.
It's not because they're worried about hurting other people. They're worried about getting beat up.
Well, that would be obviously my heart, though, and my intentions is that's hurtful. I don't want to do that. If now listen, there comes a time I'm not opposed to telling the truth in love. But there's nothing about that, you know what I'm saying? Because so I want to be careful to distinguish. Like, I'm not saying that as a Christian that I should shy away from telling people the truth because I don't want to offend them or I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to if I don't have to. And 99.5% of the time, you don't have to. As a matter of fact, I can't think of an instance where I would have to be rude or curt or forceful or insistent about almost anything. So like I said, the best way I could describe this aspect of swearing is just that it's hurtful in a way that if somebody were to say something about your mom or somebody you love, that kind of way, like it's hard to describe.
So would it be, and I don't mean to make light of what you just said, but would it be kind of like if somebody said something bad about your favorite sports team? I mean, would it be kind of like that, but worse? I mean, is it like that same kind of motivation? Like, you identify that sports team as part of my troop, my clan, and you mess with my clan, you mess with me, kind of thing? Is it a territorial thing?
No, I don't think it could be, at least not for me, because I'm a huge...
Because you identify as a Christian, right. And so that's a big part of what you see is your person.
Now, right, well, so, right? And the difference is this, though, at least for me, like, I'm a huge Browns fan. I love the Browns, but it doesn't bother me.
That's a bummer.
Right. Like, I know a lot of Steeler fans, and we're huge rivals, and and they will say things all the time, and most of it's busting chops. But even if they were serious, it wouldn't bother me at all. Right. It just doesn't bother me. But the sheer fact that I don't say that like that that Christianity is the religion I follow. Like, I am a Christian. That is like my essence. Like, it's weird, and it might be weird for me to say this, and I don't know how much. I mean, I'm not saying you're stupid and you can't understand it, but like, I don't know if this is going to sound weird to you, but it's who I am. So the Browns aren't who I am. The Browns are just something I like. And even if I love the Browns, even if I had a Browns room here at the house and I had season tickets and I was their biggest fan, I think pales in comparison to this, because I think this is more, for me, it's more sacred. And it has this ring of importance.
So it's a difference in quality in addition to quantity.
Yes.
It's not just taking that, your love of the Bears and magnifying it, right? You're saying it's a whole different, whole different animal.
For me. Yeah. For me, it is.
Okay.
Now there might be some people who don't like, using the Lord's name because they do somehow identify and has that tribe kind of mentality, and they're, that maybe, but at least that's not my my motivation. Like I said, the closest thing I could express is that feeling you have when somebody is being disparaging about someone else you love, and whatever the motivations are behind that, I don't know that I can identify all those. Other than with a feeling. And that's the feeling you get when, someone's being disparaging about someone you love.
Right.
So that would be that's religious.
That's kind of like the clan thing too. But before we get away from, this idea of swearing as a social construct, I want to kind of revisit what you were saying. And you read off a couple of Bible verses, and the one from Ephesians says, "Do not let any unwholesomeness or unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." Now, one could say, and obviously I'm somewhat in this camp, and obviously you're not, but one could say that much of the Bible is very destructive and very unwholesome and unhelpful for building up others.
Right.
Okay. Obviously you disagree there, and I know I'm risking a huge rabbit hole here, so I'm hoping we can avoid that.
No, I think it's easy.
But at least you agree that some people view it that way.
Absolutely.
Whether or not you agree with them, at least you can acknowledge that some people see it that way. So in that respect, do you think even the content of the Bible, and I know that you believe that there's a divine source for the content there, but it was still written. It was still written by people, and it was still written using human language, and it was still written using human expectations and social mores and stuff like that. So do you think that even when we talk about a religious objection versus it's a social construct, do you think that those kind of things overlap at all, or do you think?
Well, I mean,
because there's going to be some people that think that the Bible is right. Is not helpful. Right. And so in that respect, it seems the Bible is saying you shouldn't listen to the Bible.
Right. No, that makes sense. I could see where people would get that. I think I would say to that, and I hope this avoids the rabbit trail because it seems pretty clear in my mind. I would always tell my students that when you read the Bible, there's things in the Bible that are descriptive and things that are prescriptive. So the Bible doesn't, a lot of what is in the Bible isn't prescribing anything to us. It's not prescriptive. It's not saying, hey, you go do this yourself. A lot of times what's written in the Bible is just a description of what we would consider history. Like, this is what happened in history. It's just the plain brute fact. And it doesn't, it has no real connotations. So it's not like the Bible saying, yes, go out and do this. It's just describing what happened. And so I would say that's probably the distinction or the difference that there might be things in the Bible that seem like, man, that's pretty bad. Or like, man, I can't believe the Bible says not to swear. But yet you see over here, this person doing X, Y, and Z. And so in which case I would just say that there's that distinction between, the Bible, there are things that are just straight up descriptive of what happened. Here's a story. This is what happened. The Bible's not saying, hey, I want you to act like that.
But so do you think that, like the use of the words like unwholesome and that kind of thing, deceitful, evil, cursing, that kind of thing. I mean, when we're swearing nowadays, it might not necessarily fit that particular mold. I mean, are we taking when you apply these religious stories, suggestions, all the way up to commands?
Yep.
When you apply these to the way that we do today, are we kind of molding our society to kind of fit into this biblical outline, or what's the deal there?
I don't expect anyone who isn't a Christian to follow the Bible. I mean, so that's why I don't.
But I think that you would encourage it.
Well, I would encourage it in as much as I think it's the truth.
Right. Well, regardless of the reason, I mean, you're not gonna. Well, I don't know. Maybe I don't know if you found out somebody didn't follow the Bible. You might think less of them, might not. But that's not the point, though. But you would still. You're saying I don't care if somebody else doesn't follow the Bible, but you still would like them to, right?
Sure.
I mean, you do.
Yeah.
It's just that you're not going to demand that they do just because you want them to, right? You prefer to go the route, and trust me, I know this fact because I've been on the receiving end for quite a bit of it. You would prefer to try to convince them, right?
Yeah, and I don't like. Here's the thing: I don't expect non-Christians to behave and act according to what the Bible says. Now, I will say that I know a lot of non-Christians, a lot of atheists who live better moral lives than a lot of Christians. And so I'm not saying that somehow Christians are moral and non-Christians aren't. I'm just saying that I don't necessarily apply these biblical standards to anybody else but myself, and obviously in trying to influence my family in following these things. So,
yeah. And we're well over an hour into this
on
one.
Swearing.
Maybe we should start looking to fucking swearing, right?
So anyhow, that is, I think
the fucking Catalina wine mixer.
To end this or wrap it up, kind of bring it full circle. It seems, at least on some level, that your worldview kind of determines your view on swearing, at least in the sense of, like, obviously as a Christian, I think most Christians, most theists would kind of have my take on it as far as like, hey, anybody else wants to do whatever they want. But as for me, I want to try to do what I think, God would find pleasing and commands and things like that. So, but swearing seems to have some very interesting and surprising beginnings. I found that very interesting that it had religious kind of applications to it initially, and I think that it's interesting that there are so many different ways or reasons to swear, and that there's a physiological and psychological. I don't know. Does it produce endorphins or? I wonder if that's the case. If it produces some kind of good chemical in there in your brain to do that. So swearing, it's a big fucking deal. Well, and that is it for swearing. Man, that was fun. It was fun because I didn't want to kill you afterwards.
I'm glad you're in Ohio and I'm in Minnesota.
It was,
I have all that distance as a buffer.
It's like a 3-day wait period. It doesn't take me three or so days to get up there, and by the time I get there,
you'll be all cooled down by the time you get over here.
I mean, I've been almost to your house before. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm fine now. I've turned around and come home.
Okay, now you're creeping me out. Now I'm gonna have to move. Hey, you know what? We forgot. We missed something when in our talk. I realized after we had recorded that, and we had this on our agenda for the discussion, but we forgot to talk. There was one little thing that we forgot to talk about, and that was the whole idea that when people are writing out swear words, the way that they like if you want to say fuck or something, instead of writing F-U-C-K, they write F and then an asterisk and then C-K.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I think when I reviewed this very podcast, and we went through, when I went through and sent you some stuff, I actually think I did that where Scott
in
says
the
this.
edit list. Yeah.
The edit list. And I actually put in the little asterisk and in the different swear words.
What's up with that? I don't get that at all.
Know.
Who are you fooling? Who are you fooling?
You're right.
We all know.
You're right.
It's perfectly clear what word you're trying to say.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
And when I read it, I say the word in my mind when I'm reading through
and
that.
I say the word in my mind when I write it out too.
I totally don't get that at all. It's like it kind of reinforces that whole it's magic thing. Right, it's like you're going to be cursed if you say this or something. It's just
I think what it boils down to is that for those of us who are who don't want to swear, we use that and we're trying to, I don't know, I guess we're just trying to stay, if we have to somehow like put that in there for some reason, then, we're trying to.
But you're still swearing. It's the same.
Yeah. Right.
It's still, I don't get it.
You got me on the letter of the law. All right. The letter of the law, Scott. So anyhow.
Right.
That was a good one.
Oh, is that a pun there? The letter, right? I get it.
Yeah. No, I actually did not. It wasn't intended, but thank you. Yeah. So. All right. Well,
so what do we got coming up next?
So next we have a little side bit here, Scott. You're going to talk about something, and it's in our bit called "Oh, the Humanity."
Oh, the Humanity.
All right, for Oh, the Humanity this time, I wanted to talk about something I experienced this past week, and I'll give you the scenario first, and then we'll talk about what was going on. Now, this happened. It was on social media, and I was somebody whose opinion I've come to respect quite a bit. Said something.
Thanks, Scott.
It was not Jamie. Okay. Although I do respect your opinion quite a bit, Jamie.
Thank you, buddy.
And see, here's where you say, "Oh yeah," and I respect your opinion.
I respect your opinion too. This was your thing. Yeah. I didn't want to jump in too much.
No, that wasn't forced at all, right? That was just totally natural.
Not contrived.
But anyway, so this person that's important to my point though, is that this person I've come to respect their opinion quite a bit, and they were saying something, and I had a slightly different spin on it, and so I presented my opinion on this particular topic, and they came back and they kind of disagreed with me. Okay. And so then, the way I saw the situation was that we weren't in disagreement. And so I started to try to explain how I thought that, that we were really kind of saying the same thing. It was just from a slightly different perspective. But then as I was doing that, I was wondering, I was like, okay, did I really think that? Before this person disagreed with me, did I have a problem with that? Did I think that we agreed, or was I a victim of the halo effect? And that's what I want to talk about today. The halo effect is it's a psychological, phenomenon. It's something that affects all of us. And what happens is, if there's somebody who you admire or respect, or an authority figure, somebody who you have a high opinion of in one particular area, if they make comments or ideas or whatever in other areas, you have a tendency to hold them up to that same level of regard. Okay, so even though I respect this particular person because of some of their opinions in one particular topic, but this was a slightly different topic. And so I was wondering, wow, okay, so I think that, I think it was the former. I think I actually did agree with them, and I was trying to explain it, but I had to second guess myself there. I had to stop myself and say, wait a minute, am I just saying that I'm looking at it slightly differently because I want to agree with them? Am I trying to morph my different opinion into their same opinion? See what I mean there?
Right. Yeah.
And so it's like a psychological drive. It's just like psychological, almost a directive. And, we see it all the time too. We see it like a Hollywood actor why do we listen to Hollywood actors for economic advice or political advice or religious advice? We think they're a really good actor, or I think this particular person's a great musician. And so, but why do I care what they think about AIDS? But we do that. I mean, it's a natural thing. And the way that it works is that it's our brain taking a shortcut. Okay. And so we know that we respect this person for this particular thing. And so then in our mind, we kind of categorize them as being good.
So would you say that is like that we follow their lead because we think that since they're good or true, like have some truth value in some subject or area, that then that is true of other areas, including maybe the area that
well, it's not that it is true. It's that we feel it's true because our brain kind of took this shortcut and said, okay, we're going to, we don't really get down to the nitty gritty when we're categorizing people like that. And so so what happens is we know that we respect this person, or we admire them, or we fear them, or whatever could be the motivator there. We hold them on a pedestal in some respects. And so then when even if the thing is totally unrelated, even if the topic under discussion is totally unrelated to what they're really good at, since we've categorized them as just good, then our minds take a shortcut. And even if we sit here saying, I just don't really care what George Clooney has to say about the economy or climate change or whatever, I don't, for as far as I know, he's not an expert. I mean, you could argue, well, he's a Hollywood actor. They probably have a lot of free time or whatever. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if he's well read on the subject, but that's kind of the point. I have no idea what his qualifications are.
Is this different though than say somebody is that you have not just grown to respect them, but you find them reliable in one area of truth? And so you just automatically assume kind of reliability in other aspects of truth? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I know there are some people that that aren't experts in a certain field, but since I found them reliable in their field of study, I have a more tendency.
You have a tendency to trust them in other fields,
right? And I don't know that is that the halo effect, or is that just
because it's not specific about people you like or people, it's the idea is that the reason they call it the halo effect is because they're like a shining light, this shining light in this one particular area, but the light gets cast on all of the surrounding unrelated topics, and so the key there is that you take an opinion in one area and it kind of splashes onto other areas as well. Yeah.
Okay. Very
good.
And
so I think that could be. I did have and as I was thinking about this, it reminded me of a time I have experienced that from the reverse, from the other side. And I'm a teacher. I'm also a father. I'm also a martial arts instructor for many years, and so I'm used to being in positions of authority. And I remember one particular instance. This was many years ago. This was I teach college now, but I was teaching high school at the time, and this was for a computer science class, and it was at the end of the school year. So we had like a game day. The kids had all finished all their projects or whatever, and so we were just having a game day. And so the kids were playing Risk. And so they asked me if I wanted to play, and I was like, okay, yeah, I like playing Risk. And I noticed that I could influence the other players because they were my students. And I thought it was really strange. I was like, why are they doing what I say? And it's because, I'm assuming that they had some sort of respect for me, or at the very least, I was an authority figure in the classroom when it came to computer science. But we had never talked about Risk in the classroom. They had no idea if I had even ever played the game before, but I found that I could, and I was conscious, and I played fair, and I didn't take advantage of this, but I just noticed that if I was making suggestions to the players, that they would weigh my opinion more than the other players. So it's just weird kind of experiencing that from the other direction.
That reminds me of a quote, and I'll tie it in a second. It's, and I might be botching it here, but it's absolute power corrupts absolutely. and the idea being that, could you imagine being like a celebrity, say, and having kind of that halo effect on people?
Yeah, that would kind of mess you up.
The kind of power that you would kind of gain over people, over circumstances. I think that's sometimes why you see some people who are in power throw little temper tantrums when things don't go their way, because they're so used to getting things a certain way. And a lot of it might have to do with this halo effect.
That very well could be. Yeah, they're just used to people doing whatever they want. And so when it doesn't, it just doesn't. Maybe it's even a halo effect on themselves.
Now, do you think that this goes the other way, or would it be called something else when you can't stand someone? And so you automatically assume that because of that something else that I don't care if they're an expert in that field. They're
Hitler
wrong.
liked cats, so you can't, so I don't like cats, that kind of thing.
Is that, what would that be called? And is that, do you know if that is the halo effect in a different way?
I would say, yes, I would say it is. That you might call it something different, maybe poisoning the well, or some other kind of effect. But it's a similar kind of thing. You're saying, okay, Hitler was a really horrible person when it came to. I'm assuming that you agree with me on there, by the way.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Hitler was a horrible person when it came to, taking care of humanity and that kind of thing. Who knows how he treated his pets? And, they could be totally unrelated. It might be, maybe he tortured pets as a child. Maybe he took very good care of his pets. Who knows? I certainly don't know. So, I could see that kind of
You
going
could
both
even
ways.
bring that closer to home. Say, for instance, an atheist to a Christian, because I know we might joke about this all the time, but I know that a lot of times within Christendom is, there's this kind of probably unintentional kind of, hey, atheism, kind of like this is kind of bad juju. And so there might be instances where an atheist is dead on about something, but say a Christian might have a hesitancy to buy in because, okay, well, if I'm agreeing with him on this, so there's that kind of thing. Yeah, this is very interesting, this halo effect, how it could be, perceived and from both ways.
I'm sure there's lots of different iterations and little different tweaks, and it's probably part of some kind of larger. Like in politics, you might see like one party presents an idea and then the other party says, no, that's horrible. Even though in some cases it might be the exact same thing that the other party presented 2 years ago.
Right.
And so, but now since it has your name on it, now it's horrible.
That's
that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's more of an ideological thing. Obviously it's clearly at least related to the halo effect. I don't even know if these things have, clear delineations between, this is definitely the halo effect and this is definitely not. Right. But, it's along that same kind of idea. Anyway, that's the halo effect.
Very interesting concept. And that about wraps it up for episode number 8. Please send us your ideas, questions, and comments to email at godornotpodcast.com. If you'd like to know more about the topics covered in this episode, Scott, what do you recommend?
I recommend a book called Holy Shit, A Brief History of Swearing And it's kind of funny, though, because in the title, they replaced the I in the word shit with an asterisk, like we were just talking about.
Terrific.
But yeah, this is a book by an author called Melissa Mohr, Mohr, and it's just a really fascinating, deep historical dive into the history of this phenomenon of swearing. And she goes way back into the ancient times. I mean, as long as we've had language, we've had ways people express this kind of emotional outpour. And so it's really, I mean, she has tons and tons of examples, like from ancient Roman times and all the way up through the ages. And the idea of the book is that swear words kind of break down into two main categories: the holy and the shit. And so we have these, we have the blasphemy, right, with those types of words. And then we also have the profanity, would that be profanity, or would that be,
I don't know. Right.
Well, you get the idea, like the stuff, the bodily functions,
right,
the sexual connotations and the defecation and stuff like that.
Being that or something. No?
I don't know. Probably.
All right.
Probably. It's tough to say. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of some that are kind of, I imagine that wouldn't be a holy reference. And
right.
But anyway, it's called Holy Shit, A Brief History of Swearing by Melissa Mohr.
Very good. I recommend a book called A Christian Manifesto by Francis Schaeffer. And while it doesn't have much to do with...
Did he replace the I in Christian with the asterisk?
No, he didn't have such thing.
No, but he just came out and said it.
He came out and said it, right? Because,
right.
Yeah, so...
I'm sorry. I'm derailing you here.
It is. It's not particularly about swearing, but it does talk a lot about truth and morality and culture. And a lot of us Christian thinkers think he was way ahead of his time. He was a philosopher, and we think he was way ahead of his time as far as kind of gauging where culture and society was headed. So it's just an interesting read about kind of the Christian worldview, culture, truth, that kind of thing. So it's called A Christian Manifesto by Francis Schaeffer. We want to thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll be back with us next time when Scott and I will be talking about death, dying, and grief. Until then, this is your dialectic duo reminding you to talk to each other.
See ya.
This has been the God or Not podcast. Send your questions or comments to email at godornotpodcast.com. If you'd like to support the show or grab some God or Not gear, please visit the website at www.godornotpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.